Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for December 13th through 19th. This week I read 3 books, I watched 3 shows, and I listened to 1 book. First I read The Foxhole Court by Nora Sakavik. This is the first in the All for the Game series. This series has to do with a boy named Neil, or at least that's the name he's going by at this point. He's approached by some people that want him to come to their university to play this sport called Exy. Exy is a huge sport that has only been around for about 30 years now, and it's kind of like lacrosse, but it's played on a field as big as a soccer field in an indoor stadium, and also it is super violent. He doesn't think it's a very good idea to join this team, however, because, as you might have guessed, he's been on the run for a while and he has some very powerful people that if they find him, they will kill him. One of those people includes his father, who goes by the moniker The Butcher. This story both has a lot going for it and a lot of trigger warnings, so if you need trigger warnings, definitely look those up ahead of time before going into this series because wow, it gets dark. The things it has going for it, however, is at least a couple of queer characters, this wonderful found family dynamic. It's such a compelling plot that I just wanted to continue reading just to see how it would end up. And as I've previously discussed, I don't really care about sports unless it's in some form of narrative, and this made me care about this totally made-up sport. The second book I read this week was The Raven King, which is the follow-up to The Foxhole Court. It's really hard to talk about a second in a series without spoilers, but I'm going to do my best. This book primarily has to do with the rivalry between the Foxhole Court, which is the lowest ranked team in the league because it only recruits people who are misfits, and the Ravens, who are the highest rated team in the league. Their coach is actually one of the 2 people that created the sport in the first place, and they are super regimented. They go to their university and they basically don't leave their stadium unless they are going to class because all of their dorms are in the stadium. They are super hardcore. It is not healthy, it is super toxic. Obviously, being the second book in a series, there are a lot of revelations, there are a lot of things that move the plot forward. We learned a lot more about the characters because there are so many characters on the team, you didn't know too much about them, but you start to learn more and more and more, which makes it such a delight to just see this team coming together, or seeing what's keeping them apart. However, being this series, there is definitely some dark stuff that happens in this book as well, so again, trigger warnings are very important for this series. If you need them, just please let me know. Up until this point in the series, the violence has been more abstract or talked about in the past, and in this book it comes up on the page. The third book I read this week was The King's Man, which is the 3rd book in the All in the Game series, so I finished the entire series. It feels like I've known these characters for a really long time, but I only started reading them 6 or 7 days ago. Again, being the 3rd and concluding book in a series, I can't really say too much specifically about this. Besides, this book I believe is the longest out of the 3 books, and it definitely packs in a lot of things. Again, the stakes continue to be upped. There is a lot more of playing of the game. There is a lot of rivalry, obviously. Characters that were previously just written about show up on the page, and I'm not just talking about 1 or 2, I'm talking about a lot of them. And it gets to the point where our protagonist might not be able to keep his secrets anymore. I enjoyed this series more and more and more as I got through it, and I think that this was my favorite book out of the series. Again, all of the trigger warnings for these books, there are so many trigger warnings. The ones that aren't particularly spoilerish include the fact that there's a lot of ableism or toxic masculinity. I also wanted to talk about there's a character who is put on this type of drug to keep him in a manic state for 3 years because of an assault that happened prior to the first book starting, and that in itself could be a whole triggering thing just because I don't know if that type of drug or sentencing actually exists in our real life. So if you're the type of person that wants to read a series but wants the mental health aspect to be specifically how it works in our world and not in this slightly different world with this made-up sport, that is something to note. All of the players, however, have to see a therapist every semester, and some of them see the therapist more often than that, so I can see that this was definitely trying to be very mental health positive, but because I don't know enough about that world, I can't speak to how authentic it would be. Because this is fiction, and if you needed the mental health to work slightly differently in this world where you've created this whole different sport for plot reasons, I understand that. On to what I watched this week. We watched a few more episodes of Community. This is just so delightful to sit down and revisit these characters. We also skipped ahead and watched a couple of the Christmas episodes from other seasons just because why not? 'Tis the season. They're really good episodes. We also watched at least half of the episodes of Firefly Firefly, but we didn't watch them in order. We just kind of skipped around and watched kind of whichever one my roommate wanted to watch at the time. This series is great. It's fun to look back at it and be like, look how young everyone looks. That's such a weird thing, because obviously they just look like their normal selves when it was current, and now you've seen them in other things and you've seen how they've aged, and that will always be a slightly weird phenomenon. This also just makes me want to consume more things with space cowboys, more things with badasses, more things with morally gray characters, more things with chaotic neutral characters, because that is what Jane is, and yeah. And then this week we realized that Netflix updated the episodes that it has for Jeopardy, so we watched a lot of episodes of Jeopardy. I like how this set has been bundled together because we had a couple of random episodes where somebody won for 2 or 3 days, and then we had a teacher's tournament, and then we had this one guy named Austin Rogers go on his long stretch. I think he won for 9 or 10 days. He ended up with like $411,000. And now we're into a tournament of champions, so people who have previously won large amounts of money over more than one day coming together and battling each other, which is a lot of fun. Obviously it tends to be a very American-centric program, so it's talking about history. It's usually like the US Civil War, and I'm like, I know nothing about the US Civil War besides there was a North and a South, and that's basically all anyone needs to know. But this gets like deep into like which battle happened here and who did this, and I'm like, I don't know. I just need these questions to go on to the literature questions, which are then always 19th century dead old white guy literature, and I'm just like, but why? But we have a lot of fun answering these questions because occasionally questions will come up and you know the answer and you have no idea how you know the answer. The book I listened to this week was Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Obviously I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook was narrated by Michael C. Hall of Dexter fame, so that was what drew me into picking this one up finally, because it's a King classic that I just never read when I was a child. And yes, I was reading Stephen King when I was a child. I was that weirdo. This is such a big book in the horror world that you're probably familiar with what happens in it, even if you've never really consciously heard somebody describe it before. This family moves to this small town in Maine, and just off their property is this old pet cemetery where children from around the area have been burying their pets for years. One day when our protagonist's family is away visiting his in-laws, his daughter's cat dies, and his neighbor, who he's become really good friends with, basically takes him to this section past the pet cemetery where they bury the cat, and then the next day the cat comes back. This was nearly a 16-hour audiobook and about almost 600 pages in print, so obviously there's a lot more to it than that, but that is the main premise of it. What if you could bury something and it could come back? Overall, I found this experience very enjoyable. Michael C. Hall did a lot of different voices for a lot of the different characters with a lot of different accents, which worked really, really well. I enjoyed how our main character was a doctor, and that background played into a lot of things that happened, as well as his uncle being an undertaker, so that had to play into things as well. This does fall into some of the same pitfalls that King works fall into, such as relying on the trope of the old Indian burial ground. Obviously there's not going to be a hell of a lot of diversity in the cast of this book, but Stephen King himself has said that this is the book that has terrified him the most, and yeah, I can see that, especially at this point in his life. I think that his children were very young, and it would be something terrifying to think of should you have children. I should also mention that every single book that I read this week counted towards the Reindeer Readathon, so I was really proud to knock out 4 of my challenges, actually 5 of my challenges this week. I still have a lot of catching up to do because I didn't read any books for this challenge for the first 10 days or so because I was reading for the Queer Lit Readathon and wrapping up for that, so I still have, I think, 5 books to go before the end of the year. Let's see if I can do it. But that's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as the link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you want to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!